For 30 years, the most photographed private hostess in America ran a country house on Long Island that defined fashion. The living room floor was lacquered emerald until it shimmered like snakeskin. Picassos and Cézannes hung salon-style on the walls, and the bedsheets were ironed twice, once in the laundry and once on the bed. This is the story of Babe Paley, the CBS empire her husband built, and the vanished estate called Kiluna Farm. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button, and let's explore this house. This video is brought to you in part by Victorian Society in America. More on them later. In 1915, Babe Cushing was born the youngest daughter of Dr. Harvey Cushing, the celebrated Harvard surgeon, often described as the father of modern neurosurgery. The family was prominent and intellectually distinguished, but it was not particularly wealthy, and that distinction would matter a great deal in the world Babe was about to enter. She graduated from the Windsor School in 1934 and made her formal debut in Boston that fall. Around that time, she was in a car accident that knocked out her front teeth and shattered her jaw. The reconstructive work was extensive and dental bridge work permanent, and by some miracle, she emerged from it looking even more striking than she had before. She was tall, dark-haired, slender, and possessed of what photographers of the era would later describe as a kind of immaculate composure. She went to New York with her new look, and by 1939, she was a fashion editor at Vogue, a job that gave her access to designers who dressed her on the understanding she would be photographed in their work. The arrangement paid off. In 1941, Time magazine ranked her the second best-dressed woman in the world, behind only the Duchess of Windsor. She would be named to the International Best Dressed list 14 times across her life and inducted into its Hall of Fame in 1958. Her style was famous for its restraint and its small invented gestures. She once tied a scarf around the handle of her handbag, supposedly because she had nowhere else to put it, and within months, thousands of American women were copying her. She mixed her real Schlumberger and Verdura jewelry with costume pieces from Kenneth J. Lane. She let her hair go gray in middle age. She made trousers acceptable for evening. None of it was the product of a stylist or a large clothing budget. It was the product of editorial instinct, applied to her own body the way another person might apply it to a magazine spread. In September 1940, she married Stanley Mortimer Jr., a great-grandson of one of the original Standard Oil partners. The marriage did not survive Mortimer's service in the war. He returned shadowed by what was eventually diagnosed as manic depression, and the couple divorced in 1946. She met her second husband not long after. William S. Paley was one of the great American business figures of the 20th century, and his story is essential to understanding everything that followed. The son of cigar makers in Chicago, he had taken over the family's interest in a small chain of struggling radio stations in 1928 and built it within a decade into the Columbia Broadcasting System, a network of 114 affiliates, better known today as CBS. His central business insight was simple and durable. The network, not the local station, would sell the advertising and supply the programming to affiliates more or less for free, in exchange for their airtime. That model became the template for American broadcasting and made Bill Paley one of the most powerful men in post-war media. Now, he had already bought Kiluna Farm by the time he met Babe. The 80-acre Long Island estate had come into his possession in 1938 during his first marriage. Together they spent the next 30 years turning Kiluna Farm into the most quietly influential country house of mid-century America. Before we tour the estate, a quick word about the sponsor of today's video, Victorian Society in America. Are you captivated by historic architecture? Want to explore, learn, and dive even deeper into the past? With the Victorian Society in America, you'll have the chance to travel to American cities and tour stunning 19th century buildings, pursue learning through internationally acclaimed summer programs in American cities and abroad, including Chicago, Newport, and London to name a few. Additionally, members will enjoy a free subscription to 19th Century, the semi-annual publication packed with articles on art, architecture, preservation awards, and book reviews. Visit the website below in the video description and become part of the Victorian Society in America today. Thank you, Victorian Society in America, for sponsoring this video. Now back to our tour. The estate had a pedigree before Paley ever set foot on it. The original house was a shingle-style country residence completed in 1910 by the Manhattan firm of Walker and Gillette for Ralph Pulitzer Sr., son of the publisher Joseph Pulitzer. Bill Paley's first wife, Dorothy, began the modernization. She installed a saltwater swimming pool and an indoor tennis court, and she began the more consequential project of filling the walls with paintings. Bill had bought his first major canvas in 1933. a small self-portrait by Paul Cézanne acquired directly from the painter's son. By 1936, he had added important works by the likes of Matisse and Picasso. In the late 1940s, a fire damaged significant portions of the original Pulitzer House. The Paleys rebuilt, and the rebuilding was deliberately less elaborate than the original shingle confection. The new house was lower, more horizontal, and more clearly indebted to American colonial precedent. Babe used the reconstruction as the occasion to begin again from scratch on the interiors, and she did so with one of the most influential decorators of the century at her side. Billy Baldwin had inherited the firm of the great American decorator Ruby Ross Wood upon her passing in 1950, and by the time the Paleys hired him, he was on his way to becoming the most sought-after interior designer in New York. The interiors he created at Kiluna with Babe became in their own time something close to legendary. The living room floor was painted in a deep emerald enamel and then lacquered until it took on the shimmer of a polished snakeskin. Paintings were hung salon-style, packed close in the English country house manner, the Cézannes and Matisses jostling each other on the walls. The mantel held collections of 19th century Rockingham tulip vases. The furniture mixed 18th century French and English antiques with painted American country pieces and the low, deep slipper chairs that became Baldwin's signature. The kind of chair built for long conversation rather than display. Babe's attention to the running of the house was famous and slightly unnerving. The bed sheets were ironed twice, once in the laundry and once after they had been made up on the bed. Cut flowers were arranged daily, grown in Kiluna's own greenhouses by a head gardener who served the family for 25 years. She picked the bath salts that house guests would find waiting for them. She directed the menus, the silver, the seating, the linen. Over 30 years, the house received notable guests including Truman Capote, Slim Keith, CZ Guest, Gloria Gaynor, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, Grace Kelly, Lucille Ball, and a steady traffic of CBS executives, politicians, and visiting royalty. Capote, who entered the circle in the mid-1950s, called the group of women at its center the Swans, and among the Swans he placed Babe first. She had become by then the standard against which a particular kind of mid-century American style was measured. In November 1975, Esquire magazine published a chapter from Truman Capote's long-promised novel, Answered Prayers, under the title Le Code Basque. In it, Capote retailed thinly disguised, easily identifiable, and extraordinarily damaging gossip about the very women who had spent 2 decades protecting him, including a story about a Paley-like broadcasting executive on his knees scrubbing a stranger's blood from his sheets. Babe read the piece, set it aside, and never spoke to Capote again. She was already dying. A lifetime of smoking had caught up with her in 1974 in the form of lung cancer, and she spent her remaining time planning her own funeral, wrapping her jewelry in colored tissue paper with handwritten notes naming the recipients. She passed away in 1978, the day after her 63rd birthday. Bill Paley outlived Babe by 12 years. He sold Kiluna in the 1980s and passed away in 1990, leaving his great art collection to the Museum of Modern Art. Around that time, an arsonist who has never been publicly identified set fire to the main house, and the remains were eventually cleared away. A gated community called Stone Hill at North Hills now sits on the old estate's footprint. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What did you think about Kiluna Farm? Let me know down below in the comments section. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to Victorian Society in America for sponsoring this video. Check out their link in the video description to find out how you can get involved today. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on This House.